and we'll get started.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right. Um, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. We've got a really special surprise and well, not surprise because I told you what was happening, but a very special appearance today by a gentleman that really is probably the best person for us to hear from. He's got an incredible history and research with omegas. I think his first study was published, if I'm not mistaken, back in 1980. And since then, he's got over 300 published studies. He's a PhD in nutrition. He's a professor at the medicine at the in University. I think it's Sanford in South Dakota. And last but not least, he is the co-inventor of the Omega Index and the founder of Omega Quant. And most recently, founded the Fatty Acid Research Institute as well. He is also going to be speaking live in person for us at the upcoming Vision Conference. So this will just be a sneak peek of, hi, Wendy, of we're just delighted that he's taken time out of his busy schedule to join us today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce everybody to Dr. William Harris. How are you this afternoon, Dr. Harris?
Doing well. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
Awesome.
Great.
All
Yeah,
right.
a lovely
Welcome,
day.
welcome.
So what do you
Well,
want to do here today, Corey?
all right. Well, I was going to ask Wendy. No. So as you know, we've got a group of 50 people that are currently taking our product. And I think the first half 25 is about almost 2 months through. And the second one got started about a month after. And so we actually have had an Omega product. We'll be releasing, as everybody here knows, an upgraded version of it at conference coming up in mid-October. And, we really became enamored with this incredible Omega test because I knew I needed to take Omegas. I think everybody's heard of Omegas. They know they need to take them. In fact, when I go to the doctor, I don't go that often, but whenever I did, that would be the one nutritional that they would always say, hey, make sure, because I have high cholesterol in my family. So they'd always say, make sure you take omegas. It's the only nutritional that's ever been prescribed to me by a doctor. And I think that's, fairly common. But even despite that, so many people know that they should be taking omegas. They're not for whatever reason. There's a lot of options. But when I learned about all the science and all the reasons and the studies and the documented research that's been done, I can't take enough of it. And the more I learn, the more excited I get, because we're all into health and wellness on this call. We take various things, but if there was one nutrient to rule them all, I mean, it's omegas. I mean, it's just there's so many different vital organs of the body that it's good for. And now with your omega test that you invented, it's so easy because you never know if what you're using is working or not. You know by effects on the body, but this is an incredible test. You don't need to go to your doctor. You can administer at home. All of us have done that. And it's just so powerful to see the number, where you're at and, like a game to get to where you are. So I guess my first question is, how did you come up with the concept for the Omega Index score? Tell it, like, how did that all come about?
Oh, that's a great question. It was the early 2000s. I was at a American Heart Association meeting in Chicago, and 2002, I think it was. And a researcher from Harvard presented a new study that looked at essentially what became the omega-3 index. Looked at that. It wasn't named that at the time, but it was blood omega-3 levels in a bunch of men that were participating in what's called the Physician's Health Study, which was a big study run out of Harvard years ago. And they had stored blood samples from all the guys that had joined this study. They had put them in the freezer and just held on to them. And after 17 years, they decided to ask the question, because there was some suggestion from earlier studies in the late 90s that omega-3s would reduce risk for sudden cardiac death, which is a fatal arrhythmia that will kill you. which is about half of the heart attacks, actually. Half of the people that die of cardiovascular disease, it's their first and only event. It's sudden. So sudden cardiac death was of interest. They went and looked at this group of healthy physicians that they recruited in the 80s, and they found that there were like 150 of them that had died of sudden cardiac death. Well, they had blood samples from these guys from when they were healthy, obviously before they died at the baseline. And so they pulled those blood samples out, and they pulled out like twice as many blood samples of men at the same age, same race, same body weight, trying to match them as much as they could. And they analyzed the omega-3 levels. And the hypothesis was that the people who died sudden cardiac death would have lower omega-3 levels. And that's what it turned out to be. And they actually looked at the people who were most likely to die were about, well, flip it around the other way. People least likely to die they're about 90% less likely to die if they had omega-3 levels in the top 25% of the group. So they split them by 25%, 25%, 20. And they looked at the highest group versus the lowest. And the risk for sudden cardiac death was 90% lower. So that's the paper that was presented.
Wow.
And I was sitting in the audience with my friend Clemens von Schacke, who is a cardiologist in Munich. And we went and had a beer afterwards. And he also is an omega-3 fan. And we said, it just hit us both. The omega-3 level means something. It's not just a marker of, how much fish are you eating, which is kind of the way it's been used in the past. It really is a risk factor. In the same way that cholesterol is, purportedly a risk factor, or high blood pressure is a risk factor, or smoking is a risk factor. But as a measurable biometric that you can actually assess on yourself, omega-3 levels mean something about your future health risk for heart disease. At least in this study, sudden cardiac death. It's been expanded since then.
Yeah.
So we said there needs to be a test that a doctor can use to assess this patient, because it's so easy. The nice thing about the omega-3 index, which we came up with in the months after this beer we were having, we decided let's propose this. Let's make write out the rationale for why the omega-3 index, we came up with that name because not all that fancy, should be a risk factor. And so we published that paper in 2004. And he and I both said, well, let's set up laboratories. I mean, nobody's doing this. Let's at least make it a laboratory that's available to offer this test. And we developed the test pretty much in my lab, and then we use exactly the same method in our two labs, one in Germany and one in the US. And so we just started plotting down the path of measuring omega-3s, eventually became available to consumers on a dried blood spot. But originally it was for research and for clinical care. That was the point of it back then. So it's grown a lot in the last 20 years, and it's been verified time and time again that this 8 to 12% target is really a great place to be for all kinds of medical conditions. So that's
over that, fascinating, awesome. So over that time since then, and this is a stacked question, I'm sure I know the answer, but I'm interested to hear you elaborate on it. But has your belief in the index score gone up or down based on all the research that you've seen in the last 20 years? Like, give us some insight on, because obviously it's getting more popular. We by the way, we plan to make sure everybody in America learns about this test. That's our goal, because when we have the ability, just a small group of people here have the ability to do it, trust me. So give us the ammunition. Why is this so important? Why are we helping people so much by enlightening them about this score and then giving them a path to restore their body back to balance, to these deficiencies?
Yeah, of course, there's so many chronic illnesses nowadays. Many of them largely driven by the crappy diet we're eating.
Sure, the sad American diet, we call it.
This is SAD, that's right.
That's right.
Standard American diet, sad. You know, and turning that ship around is a big project. But there are some things people can do. Give them something to do. Well, one thing they can do, and that's very important, is increase their omega-3 index. They can do it by, if they just decide to eat more fish, oily fish, so kind that have, that's great. I'm a fan. If they want to take a supplement, I'm a fan. I don't care how they do it, but I want them, just like a doctor, 40 years ago would say, however you can get your cholesterol down, I don't care. If you do it with diet, if you do it with drugs, I don't care. Get your cholesterol down. It's the same story going up. Get your omega-3 index up. And of course, you don't need drugs to do it. You can do it with diet or supplements. And so we've seen that 8% target, particularly clear in a study we did with about 20 other cohorts of subjects. We pooled all the data on blood omega-3 levels, and we looked at risk for death. Death from anything. And we looked at risk for death roughly between age 65 and 77, like a 12-year window. Okay. Because, if you wait long enough, everybody dies. Okay. So you can't prevent that. But high risk for death in this window of time. And we had, what was it, 50,000 people, and we had the omega-3 levels split out into 5 groups, 20%, 20%, 20%, and we looked at the highest group had an omega-3 index of around 8%. And they were the ones that had the lowest risk for death, total, cardiovascular death, cancer death, and all causes combined, all other kinds of death. I mean, and I don't mean to say that having a high omega-3 is going to prevent you from being in a car accident, and killing yourself. Things happen.
Gosh darn it, I'm out of here.
Well, yeah, sorry, bud. Or whatever. But in the big buckets of cardiovascular cancer, that's 60% of the death. Then everything else is one other big bucket. And we saw that the higher omega-3 was associated with lower risk for death across all those causes of death. And again, it was like the lowest level was like 3.5% omega-3 index, which we proposed originally. Under 4% is bad. So in this study, 3.5% was the low end, 8% was the high end, which is what we proposed 20 years ago. And that's the one that really nailed it for me, that yes, this 8% really means something. People always ask, what if I go to 10%? What if I go to 12 or 15 or 18? Well, you can't get above 19 as far as we know. I mean, dolphins, that's where dolphins are at, 19%. And that's all they eat is fish, right?
Yeah.
They eat a lot of it. So we just studied at SeaWorld, look at the, omega-3 index of dolphins, and that's kind of where it was. I don't think you can get any higher than that. But the point is, we don't know. There's so few people on this planet with an omega-3 index like over 10%. That nobody's done the studies. You can't do the studies. You can't do a whole.
Robbie Fender. That's our CEO.
Okay, well, there's one. What you need is like these population studies we do. We look at omega-3 levels predicting disease outcomes. You're stuck with whatever the population's eating. You're not supplementing everybody. And to do, of course, a big supplementation study would be hugely expensive, especially if you're going to study for 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
That's what you're really talking about. You're not talking about like a regular drug that's for heart disease. You might recruit people when they're in their mid-60s and they've already got heart disease and they've got diabetes and they smoke. And you give them a new drug and you wait for 4 years to see what happens. And yeah, some drugs are really powerful and they can make a difference. Omega-3 is not like a drug like that. It's a prevention strategy for life. That's
prevention strategy for life. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's not copyrighted. You can use it.
We will. Rose will. I can for sure tell you that.
So I'm not sure where I started with all that.
Yeah.
But that's,
okay.
I guess you asked if I was more convinced than ever that omega-3, 8% was right.
So it's interesting because, we're not a big population of seafood eaters in general. And, I was just in Spain. There's a lot of like sardines and anchovies. I happen to love stuff. Most people don't. You know, we have salmon here, it's farm salmon. There's all sorts of issues with toxicity levels. And so, you know, eating a lot of fish is challenging and it's expensive also for a lot of people. So it's really not for the average person, which is why we feel supplements, you know, we are a supplement company, are so important. And it's like such an easy solution for,
Yeah.
you know, because we're all about longevity, right? Now, one thing, you know, we're not making any claims or anything, but we're only just a small group of people here. But we keep hearing, you know, add 5 years to your life, or it's kind of the same as, you know, not having an omega and 8% can be, or having a low omega score can be the same. How did you, what can you explain the derivation of that statement that I've heard made?
Yeah, I think that probably came from one of our studies in the Framingham cohort, the Framingham group, where we were
Because that
looking.
one's fascinating to me.
Yeah, yeah, and we looked at the difference in lifespan of people. I think it's lifespan above age 60, something like that. I have to go back and look at that paper. But we looked at the difference in lifespan of having the highest omega-3 index versus the lowest. And I think it was something like about a 4.5 or 5 year difference in time to death. So extended life. So I consider people who have low omega-3 index they're dying a premature death because they could have lived longer, I think, if they had attended to their omega-3 levels, and not just, you know, the week before they died. Obviously, this is for years before.
Right, it's not a drug, or
it's not a drug. It's not a drug. What we also found in that another publication from that Framingham study, that we looked at the trajectory of risk for death in people who were smokers and people who had high omega-3 or low omega-3, and we did the combinations. You know, you're between age 65 and 75. If you're a smoker and you had a low omega-3, about 50% of those people were dead in that window of time. If you had a high omega-3 and you were non-smoker, about 15% of those people were dead. So quite a difference. And then
wow.
if you were a mix and match, you know, at high omega-3 but a smoker, or vice versa, you were right in the middle. So smoking and low omega-3 are kind of in the same ballpark as a risk factor.
That's just like,
yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Pretty crazy. Yeah. I mean, wow.
Yeah, we didn't expect that outcome, but that's kind of what we saw.
Yeah. Now your daughter works with you as well.
Yes, Christina Jackson. Right.
Okay. And what's her role?
She is she's part of our research team. She's she's a dietitian and a PhD in nutrition from Penn State. And she is probably more interested in omega-3 during pregnancy, lactation, early development, kind of where her world is now, you know.
Yeah.
She's got a couple of kids, and so that's, and I'm more on the cardiovascular, neuro, cognitive decline stuff, because that's kind of where I am. So
yeah, I mean, this is one nutrient that like the body needs in the brain, like from fetal to old age.
Right.
Like every stage of your life, omegas is a constant.
Exactly. Right. So there's a lot of room for research between conception and death, obviously. I think the area that's probably least studied is sort of the mid-childhood, early teens area.
Yeah, adolescent
20s.
development. I know a lot of people have their kids are on omegas, especially for the DHA, right?
Well, we don't know if it's for the DHA or the EPA, but they both can play good roles. But yeah, there seems to be evidence of reduced aggressive behavior. They've seen that in prisons, actually.
I've heard.
That's fascinating. That should put every prisoner on.
Yeah, Dr. Ben Stuckel brought that up. He's one of our doctor advisory board members when I first chatted with him about it. Now, you know, we decided to go with the basic kit, and you have other kits, the Plus and Premier. Can you, and there's people out there that talk about the ratio of 3 to 6, and we talked about this a little bit. So, you know, in what we do, we want to keep it simple. Like, we love this story because ours is a business of, you know, we talk to people we know and love and care about.
Yeah.
And it's not like going into a retail establishment and somebody you don't know, and it's just bottles sitting up on a shelf. And so we can really, anytime I've like shared this story about how this Omega index score that it just fascinates people. It captures their attention. They want to know about it. They want to get tested. They want to know what their score is. They want to know if they're in the safe zone or the danger zone, right?
Yeah.
And so we want to keep that message really pure and simple and not complicate it too much. And so we know that, you know, there's a lot of bad seed oils out there and stuff. And because of the sad American diet, a lot of people are consuming these omega-6s as well. So in your opinion, what is more important, the omega index score, getting that up to an 8%, or getting your ratio of your 3 and 6s back, you know, down from, you know, maybe an average of 15-1 down to 2-1 or 3-1?
Yeah.
Do you think the omega index score is a
more
important component of that, or the other?
I think the omega-3 index is more important than the ratio.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. Number one, the omega-3 index focuses on the real problem, which is EPA, the lack of EPA and DHA. That is a far bigger problem than the presence of omega-6. Because we've got plenty of omega-6. Some people would say too much. I don't necessarily agree with that, but there's plenty of omega-6 floating around. What's missing is omega-3. And if you focus on this omega-6, omega-3 ratio, you can get misled very easily into saying, I'll fix my ratio by lowering my omega-6 intake and not increasing my omega-3. Because if I lower the numerator, the ratio goes down.
Right.
And that's exactly the
Simple
wrong
math.
thing to do. Right. So don't get distracted on the omega-6, omega-3. Number one, it's a very poorly defined metric. There's like 7 omega-6 fatty acids. There's 4 omega-3 fatty acids. And when you say omega-6, omega-3, it doesn't tell you which ones you're talking about. You know, it's a whole gamish of them. And it's scientifically imprecise. Secondly, you can have a ratio of 10-1 by having very low levels of omega-3 and of omega-6, or very high levels of omega-3 and omega-6. You should get the same ratio. So that's not smart. You need a certain amount of omega. It's the amount of omega-3 that's in your diet that's important, not the ratio. And I could go on, but I won't. So I do think the omega-3 index basic is the absolutely best way to do it.
Fascinating, because I know there's some, you know,
yeah, there's a lot to talk about with the omega-6 and oils and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm not sure here is the place to do it. But
yeah, well, we you know, this is just meant to just be an introduction to you. You know, you're super affable and obviously extremely passionate. I mean, you've been doing this. Why did you first get interested in omegas?
I was told to. Yeah,
and you're honest.
Yeah, sure. I got my PhD in nutrition in '78, and I'd done my dissertation was on cholesterol levels and how vitamin C might lower cholesterol levels in guinea pigs. Okay, fine. So then I wanted to go do a postdoc, which is sort of like a residency in medicine, where you start to develop your own ability to do research. And I picked a guy to go study with named Bill Connor, who was in Portland, Oregon. And Bill was a internist, but very interested in nutrition and lipid levels. And he, upon my arriving at his desk, he said, here's the project I want you to do. I'm interested in what does fish oil do to cholesterol levels? We didn't know. We knew that plant oils, seed oils, lowered cholesterol. We knew that animal fats, butter and all, raised cholesterol. This is the mid-'70s. Okay. We knew that. But we didn't know what fish oil did, because, he didn't know if it was the fact that animal fats are solid fats. Is that why they raise? Because fish oil is an animal fat, but it's liquid, like vegetable oil. So he said, and I didn't know anything about the Eskimos or any, of course.
That was the original research that was done by those Danish researchers, right? 50 years ago.
That was in the literature, mid-'70s. I should have known about it, but we pressed ahead and did a big study. We gave people, you know, half a cup of salmon oil to drink every day.
Oof.
Yeah, I know. Oofta. We were trying to sort of mimic Eskimo intake level, really high levels. This is it's Dr. Connor's idea. If you hit it with a big hammer and nothing happens, then there's no point in looking at a little hammer. You know, it's kind of idea. So we hit it with a big hammer, and we found that, you know, we lowered triglyceride levels, which was kind of the novel discovery in healthy people. But that's how I got started. He said, do this study, and that consumed a couple of years of my time doing that study, and then got interested in how omega-3s affected platelets, blood clotting, bleeding, you know, that side of the thrombotic side, as well as the lipid side. And then, so really for the first 20 years of my career, I was doing studies where I gave people fish oil and figured out what it did to them. And the second half has been this post omega-3 index discovery or development. And now I've become more of a epidemiologist, where I look at the predictive ability of omega-3 levels in the blood on different diseases.
Hello?
Well, hi.
Oops.
Somebody said hello.
So we've only got just about 10 more minutes here. What you know, and obviously we're not making any claims here, but you know, we've had an omega for quite some time, but what are some of the extra advantages or benefits of being on an omega for an extended period of time, like with your brain, cognitive function, you know, skin, because I know it affects so many different, you know, there's so much, it's like a Swiss Army knife, you know, it like does so many different things.
Yeah, right. And you know, that can be a two, you know, to play with the analogy, like a two-edged sword. If you claim it does everything and everybody for every disease, people go,
No one's gonna believe it.
yeah, who's going to believe that stuff?
Sure.
And that's probably true. I mean, I don't think there have been many studies looking at the risk of omega-3s reducing risk of cardiovascular disease, you know, randomized trials. And many of them work. The meta-analysis of all these studies still shows a significant reduction. But people have tried the same kind of thing in cancer. And maybe because there's so many different kinds of cancers and there's only one kind of heart disease. But cancer has not really been, you can't do a placebo-controlled trial with omega-3 and show that you've reduced risk for cancer. You haven't increased it, but it may not help. Our observation that cancer death, excuse me, is reduced based on, you know, having a high omega-3 for years is a different question. But I think I sometimes like to point to cancer and say, you know, here's a big disease, and we don't really have great evidence that taking omega-3 is going to treat it.
Yeah.
You know, treat it, and not maybe. And partly because the big trials haven't been done. You need to do a long trial. But I'm convinced I've seen, you know, recent studies on omega-3 on skin, on the retention, water retention in skin. I think that was a krill oil study, but it doesn't make a difference. It's omega-3. That's the point. And I'm curious, people often call it omega test. Or we love the omegas. Well, I mean, it's omega-3s. It's not just omega. And the name omega, I don't know if people know where that came from. I mean, that's part of the story, because in the 1960s, a researcher at the Mayo Clinic was studying the different kinds of essential oils, and he realized that there was a class of essential oils that had first double bond in the molecule. So these fatty acids have double bonds in them, the essential ones. And the position of the double bond makes a difference. And he decided to call all the ones that had the first double bond counting from the end of the molecule, 3 positions in, omega, alpha and omega. The first carbon is called the alpha carbon in a fatty acid, and the last carbon is the omega carbon. So no matter how many there are, there's a beginning and an end. So he counted back, this guy, Ralph Ralph, can't think of his last name at the moment. Holman, Ralph Holman. He said, well, there's a bunch of fatty acids that come from fish that have the first double bond 3 positions in from the omega. So it's omega -3. And then all the seed oil, the vegetable oils, they have a fatty acid also that's got double bonds, but the first one's always in the 6th position. So we called those omega -6. And then, so that kind of became the nomenclature. Just because of the alpha and the omega, count back from the omega carbon. It's gone away a lot in scientific publication. People want to use the term N-3 because, you know, whatever carbon number at the end of the molecule, it's the nth one. It's the last one. N-3. It's also easier. I just remember when I was typing my thesis or typing up these papers from that study we gave all the salmon oil with, every time I come to an omega symbol, I had to stop my IBM electric. I'd have to take the ball off, you know, and put the Greek ball on and hit the W and then the omega symbol. And then you got to change back to the other ball and go back to normal.
Oh my God.
Pain in the neck. And I don't mind N-3. That's fine.
Yeah.
But anyway.
That's funny. Well, needless to say, like that kind of says it all. You've been doing this for longer than anybody. You're one of the world's most renowned experts in omegas, and we're super excited to host you at our Vision conference. It's going to be, you know, it'll be a much more formal setting. I mean, we're not a really formal company, but just in the sense of sharing, because everybody there, they're going to be hearing a lot of this for the first time. So we're going to go through the study, what it means, why you want to be 8%. You know, you're a lot more advanced group here. So I just wanted to let you kind of get to know Dr. Harris a little bit, get to know his heart. And, you know, he's going to be a huge ally of ours to help us share this message with our friends, our family, and really just popularize this, because we see a world where this is just as popular. Everybody knows you need to get your blood sugar test and get your cholesterol. We feel like this should be right up there with everything else, except you can do this at home. You can share it with other people. It's easy for anybody to know. And there's an easy solution. It's guaranteed. You take this product, your index score is going to go to 8%. You're going to add years to your life. There's a whole lot of other, you know, obviously benefits of taking it. But yeah, I use my not professional Zoom account to set this one up. My email, my Yoli email address normally, so we normally have more than 45 minutes to record this, but I think it's going to cut us off here because I used the wrong account. But that's okay. I just wanted, you know, I think, you know, everybody is super. Let's put your videos on. Give Dr. Harris a chance to see your smiling faces, and let's thank him for his time and his energy in putting this together, and let him know how excited we are to see him in just about a month here at Vision. Can you imagine everybody being able to hear from him direct, live in person? We're going to do a great presentation of why people need to take this test, why they need to be on. And then, you know, it for life, right? This isn't something that you just get on for a month or a year, like, right? This is something you really for the rest of your life.
Right, exactly. Look, it's I love this format that we've done here, Corey.
Yeah, awesome.
The Q&A works real well. So hopefully we can put that together at the show too.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time again. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll put this in the back on the Facebook group so people can watch it. And we can't wait to see you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks again, Dr. Harris.